Hey guys! So I went to my local cinema and watched The Card Counter, and I thought I'd give you guys my perspective on it because there's not many reviews for this movie on the internet. A lot of people skipped out on this movie. There's a lot of movies I want to see in cinemas right now. There's this movie, there was Cry Macho, and there was Malignant. Those were the three movies I wanted to see in the cinema, and unfortunately I could only pick one of them. So I picked The Card Counter because quite honestly, that's the time that fit in my schedule. But I'm still gonna try to catch Cry Macho before it's out of cinemas, and if there's time for it, I'll try to catch Malignant as well. But guys, let's talk about The Card Counter. So Paul Schrader wrote and directed this movie. Paul Schrader, also known as Martin Scorsese's right-hand guy, he wrote movies like Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Last Temptation of Christ, a very respected gentleman in the film industry. And I have a personal anecdote with Paul Schrader. I made a film and it got into a student film festival, and I had the opportunity to go to a Q&A where Paul Schrader was promoting his film First Reformed at the time, but I wasn't able to fucking make it because I had a stupid exam. Guys, I'm still in school. I was still in school at the time, still am right now, and I had an exam scheduled during the Q&A, so I could have asked 1,000 questions to this Mr. Schrader gentleman, but wasn't able to, and yeah, that kind of sucked. I'm still kind of bitter about it. I asked to get my exam postponed or get an excused absence. They wouldn't give it to me. They didn't know who Paul Schrader was. He's made some movies I like, some movies I don't like. Like I said, I like all his shit with Scorsese, but as far as him directing, guys, one of the most underrated movies of all time, and I'm not using hyperbole here, I'm using literal. Blue Collar with Richard Pryor and Harvey Keitel. I love that movie. I think it's a great cinematic masterpiece, and not enough people talk about it. Another movie people don't talk about enough is the movie Hardcore with George C. Scott, where George C. Scott discovers that his daughter is in the porn industry and has a breakdown. I thought that was a quality movie as well, but unfortunately, his filmography is a little spotted, in my opinion, which I don't mind. When you're a person like Paul Schrader or Martin Scorsese, or you're this huge creative force, I expect a few movies in your catalog to be duds. It would be, if you have a director whose filmography is perfect, it means they're not taking any chances. So, as far as movies I didn't like of his, I actually didn't like First Reformed. I thought it was a little too artsy-fartsy for my taste, but I can still kind of respect it for what it was. So what about this movie? Well, I can say that this movie overall was okay. It wasn't the greatest Schrader film. It wasn't the worst Schrader film. Movies that... Sorry, not movies. What am I saying? So yeah, I like the performances in this movie. That's what stuck out to me. You have Oscar Isaac as the lead in this movie, and this movie is about a card counter who has a troubled past, so he resorts to card counting as his escape. So Oscar Isaac plays this really troubled man, and Oscar Isaac, look, people dunk on him, people meme on him because he was in those awful Star Wars movies, and he was in, what's that other, he was in X-Men Apocalypse, which is a garbage movie, so people keep dunking on him. Oscar Isaac is probably one of the best actors working today. Ex Machina, he was great in that. Inside Llewyn Davis, I love that movie. It's one of those movies that it came out and everyone loved, and then people started to hate on it, calling it artsy-fartsy and shit. It wasn't that. It was a very brilliantly made movie, and his singing in that movie was great as well. So I think the performances were great, and there's two other supporting performances in this movie that stood out. Tiffany Haddish is in this movie. And guys, if you're actors right now, you need the same agent as Tiffany Haddish. She knows what she's doing, this Tiffany Haddish agent, because I was having Tiffany Haddish fatigue. She blew the scene with the movie Girls Trip, and everyone's like, whoa, Tiffany Haddish! And then she started doing a bunch of lousy comedies, like that Kevin Hart movie, and the agent realized, oh shit, this can be another Melissa McCarthy situation. Let's make sure Tiffany Haddish fatigue doesn't install in the audience. So what does she do? She does a movie like Bad Trip, and Tiffany Haddish in Bad Trip was a very different performance, despite it being a comedic performance. And now she's in this movie, the card counter, which she gives a much more serious performance in, and she's actually pretty good in the movie. Now, she still does have some work to do. She's not a perfect actress, and there's some scenes where I'm just like, that could have been delivered a little differently. But keep working in this direction, Tiffany Haddish. You can make some comedies here and there, but just don't become another Melissa McCarthy. So that's it for the performances. Another performance that stuck out, was Ty Sheridan, I think is his name. But he was the kid in Ready Player One, and I thought he was very stale in Ready Player One, but he was really good in this movie. So performances around the board are pretty good. The vibe of this movie I liked. Very suspenseful, very dark, and the social commentary it had was actually pretty interesting to me. This movie deals with American imprisonment, the American prison system, the controversy surrounding Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib and places like that, how we treat inmates, how it's causing long-term psychological effects. That's what the movie deals with. And in terms of that, I thought it was all pretty interesting. The one thing I don't like about this movie, guys, is that climax. And it's hard because this movie is a slow burn, but I don't think the climax really pays off. Structurally, it's very similar to Taxi Driver. You have this societal outcast who's very quirky, has his particular things, and it builds up, and it builds up, and all of a sudden, there's that bloody battle at the end of Taxi Driver, where it's just a bloodfest, a gunfight. And that's a similar structure to many of Paul Schrader's films. First Reformed has that structure as well. And this is similar. You have Oscar Isaac, he's got his quirks, he puts bed sheets all over his house, random stuff like that. And he keeps building and building and building, and you're like, holy shit, where's this gonna take? And everything occurs off screen. In theory, I like the idea of some stuff occurring off screen. For instance, in Reservoir Dogs, the scene where Michael Madsen cuts the guy's ear off happens off screen, and it's very effective in that movie. But when it's the climax of your movie, it just leaves me something to be desired, you know? So the whole climax of this movie is leading up to one thing, and it happens off screen. You're just like, fuck. You know? You gotta give the people what they paid for a bit. Just show them a little bit of what's going on. But this movie doesn't do that. So, it's one of those few movies where I liked the build-up, but not the payoff. Usually people will say, I like the payoff, but not the build-up, because the build-up is boring. I was the complete other way around. I thought the build-up had me invested, I liked where it was going, but the climax kind of left me wanting more. So, if you don't mind getting a little cock-teased, and then... You know, this movie is kind of like going to a strip club, you know? The stripper teases you, but then at the end, no climax. That's my review of Card Counter. Yeah. So guys, Paul Schrader, by the way, is always one of those directors I'll keep going to see his movies. I don't think this is by no means an awful movie. It's not like I'm never gonna watch a Paul Schrader movie again. As I said, if you're an experimental filmmaker, you're gonna have some duds. I don't think this is a dud. I think this is a better film than First Reformed. It just left me wanting more.